Welcome back. Good afternoon. Right, this is the last session of the conference. We're going to have a quick feedback session on the workshops we had this morning, then a really engaging conversation with Andrew Morlett on the circular economy. Then we've got a little bit of a feedback session for you, and then we'll be gone before 4 o'clock. Okay, so we're all going to be done and out before 4. So, one little bit of administration, if I may. We do love feedback on this conference. If you go onto your app, I presume you've all got your app now on your phones. If you go onto the app and go to the little bit at the bottom which says More, if you click on it, you'll come to something called Surveys, and under Surveys, there is only one survey, which is feedback. So you don't need to do it now, but if you could do your feedback, it's very simple to find on the app, and I'll be reminding you again later on. So let's crack on and get the feedback going from those last 6 SDG sessions. So if I could ask the 6 moderators, please, to come up to the stage and sit as normal when 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. If you could come up to the stage, please. I can see some of you work. Jenny, you're clearly going to be 17 there.
Yep. I don't have a microphone.
No, we should have a microphone. Have I got a microphone, please? Can we have a handheld microphone, please? 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so just to quickly introduce you, we've got Cecilia and Njenga, head of UNEP office in South Africa and regional program coordinator for Southern Africa. Hakima Haite, who we've met before. John Duncan, from Senior Manager WWF Marine. Tony Simons, Director General of the World Agroforestry Centre based in Nairobi. Eelco van der Enden, a tax partner, colleague of mine from the Netherlands, and Jenny Costelloe, founder of Collective 17. So, if you were here yesterday, you know the rules. Have we got the clock going? Please, we know the rules. It's 5 minutes each, and I will be brutal, because every minute over 5 that you use, poor old Jenny here doesn't get her time. And Jenny will cry. Okay, so have we got a clock? There we go, it's going up to, oh no, we want 5. There we go. So, Cecilia.
Thank you very much. Our group was looking at SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production. We realized and recognized that natural resources are diminishing very fast and they are becoming scarce, and therefore the need for creating a balance. And we also recognize that sustainability does not mean only addressing one pillar, but requires an equal attention to all the sustainable development pillars. We underpinned the importance of taking responsibility, and this is both by the consumers and by the producers, and being able to systematically look at the sustainable consumption and production patterns. We emphasize the need for an integrated approach, the socio-ecological links towards sustainable development, and the link to other SDGs, the SDG particularly related to climate change, to oceans, to poverty, to addressing inequality, creating jobs and equity were also seen to be very relevant to this SDG. We also said the need to look across value chains. We were dealing with private sector. We had presentations from the plastic SA, from BASF, really trying to share with us their experience on how they've integrated SCP within their frameworks. So the need to introduce tools like life cycle analysis, circular economy to be part and parcel of our overall production systems. The partnerships and collaboration was emphasized, and the constant need for discussions and exchanges among stakeholders was crucial. We did have quite a bit of discussion around plastics, the global campaign going on maxima, or, on ban, total ban, on partial ban, etc., and what that really means to industry and technology and the need for technological innovation. But very importantly, there was a huge emphasis on the need to focus on consumer and social behavior. And we said that this was a difficult one, and the need for us to expand awareness expand educational programs, and we got examples from BSF in terms of how they're doing to impact on how we make choices on what we eat, the food we eat, the quality we eat, how it is produced, how it is packaged, and etc. But we also emphasize the importance of taking responsibility and the need for responsible business, and the need for behavioral insights that could be supported by consumer surveys. Policy was seen to be very important, the need for an enabling environment, both from a legislative but also equally from a voluntary aspect, and making voluntary commitments, having roadmaps in place at the country level that also looks at all spheres of government, including the role of communities and the role of the private sector for much more sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. We had quite a bit of discussion, and one of the terminologies that came that I really want to share with you, which I found interesting, was designing, and designing for where you design something that can be for multiple use. So design for recycling. How can industry, as well as we as consumers, influence the processes of how things are designed, how they are manufactured, and how we innovate in terms of how we utilize this kind of resources. But also at the bottom of it, we said we are guided by the 5 Ps. We have to be people-centered, we have to promote partnerships, we have to have prosperity being key, and very importantly, build collaborative partnerships across the board. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. 4 minutes, that's how it's done. But interesting, coming back to the same themes as yesterday, policy, community, consumer awareness. I like your design for recycling. Fantastic. Hakima, SDG 13.
Thank you. SDG 30 was related to climate change goal, and we began by reminding the impact of climate change in terms of increase of temperature, food security, sea level rise, the risk which is associated of disasters and disasters, yes, and also all the indirect impacts on migration and poverty. So the climate change is an agenda of development, and is an agenda of development, and we agreed all together, all the panelists agreed that one of the most important challenge will be for this century will be climate change. So Madeleine Ronquest, who was representing the first RAND strategy company, emphasized on the impact of climate change on her company, and emphasized also on the carbon footprinting, which allowed the company to set its own target and to improve its strategy. The climate change gives for this company the opportunity for developing innovative finance solution and create a new kind of partnership together with the corporate via national business initiative, sustainable finance, etc. The thing which was very important in this panel was that all the panelists were aware that climate change is the biggest risk in sustainability, and Africa is falling behind in reaching the 2-degree limit, and did not change the business from business perspective. And Africa need to change the policies and to deal with a better policy and the regulation for a low carbon development. The challenge is the challenge will be then to align the international treaties to the national regulation and and policies. Madeleine also emphasized on the understanding of the supply chain, where we can discover when we can reduce impact of climate change, and emphasize on the role of education and capacity building. Then Zakia, who was representing a telecommunication firm, which is a huge consumer of fossil fuel. The telecommunication, by the way, is emitting something like 4% of CO2 emission worldwide. And this is exactly the amount emitted by the whole Africa. So it's really a huge emitter of CO2 emission. This MTN company is an amazing company. Zakia shared together with us all what they are doing to align their policies and strategies to SDGs and to fight against climate change. And she emphasized on the energy efficiency, which can make a very quick efficiency, a quick win of energy or safe energy, not necessarily with a more expensive solution. She also told us about their experience concerning the valorization of the heat to create new energy in their company, and they have based their company on a partnership together with many competitors to share network side and the center data production of energy.
Got 1 minute left. Thank
1
you.
minute left.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, for the waste management in the MTN company, I think that until now, Africa is not dealing with the waste management of telecom, and I think that there are many experience, one in Morocco, and Zakia told me at the end that they were taught by Jay Zaid concerning the program of Morocco and the project of Morocco. We got also Ernest and Young Thomas representative who spoke about 2 points very important, that Africa need a strategy, Africa need new regulation, Africa need a new kind of model of development for a low carbon technology, and Ernest and Young is one of the most important company worldwide and have a lot of experience and have a lot of to bring to the development of such kind of strategy to Africa. We have the representative of an NGO, Angela, who is dealing with fighting and working to protect the people from the destructive impact of large dams, who spoke about their fight and their work to prevent the construction of dams. Okay. And the question was raised if dams are environmental friendly and are the right technology to create renewable energy, and if this is the right thing for Africa. I did an invitation to all the businesswomen who were present in the room and in the workshop to join the Marrakesh Partnership, where the worldwide coalitions are there and where they can share their experience and get benefit of the capacity building, of and also of the financial flow, which is available in
so that was the big outcome. Join the Marrakesh agreement.
Yes,
Fantastic.
Join the Marrakesh Partnership.
Thank you. But interesting also, you talked about tools like carbon footprinting, you talked about the importance of policy, just the same as some of the other panelists. Thank you very much. Can we reset the clock? John.
Right, thank you. So yeah, we were talking about SDG 14, life underwater, and I think one of the things that's very clear is that there's a disconnect between the ocean and both business and society and government in general, just based on the fact that it is over the horizon and under the surface, and I think very few of us really understand the importance of the ocean and I suppose our connection to the ocean, and I think it's SDGs are the first time that the ocean is actually featured as a global goal. So it's good to see things moving forward in that direction. But I think we did a bit of an exercise which highlighted the fact that oceans actually underpin everything. Every second breath that we take is generated by the oceans, and that these oceans underpin healthy communities, healthy business, all of this. And I think that there's slowly a kind of growing recognition that this is the issue. So we recognize that there are a number of challenges facing the ocean, and some of the key points that were raised is that in order to address this, obviously good science and good data are critical. You can't manage what you don't understand. And to this end, one of the important points raised by Ross Wanless from BirdLife was that transparency is key, and this transparency is really needed from businesses, because as I said, a lot of what's happening is happening beyond the horizon. And so it is critical for responsible business to engage in transparent processes, and there's a lot of new technology out there which can enable this. But then we went on and discussed technology a bit further and some of the opportunities that it raises, but I think one of the really interesting points which came up as well from Martin Purvis was that technology needs to be dealt with carefully, because particularly in the fishing industry, for example, we are already way too efficient at catching fish, which has led to the overexploitation of many of the resources. And he highlighted a fantastic example from Maldives, where they have actually chosen to not use the most efficient and effective fishing method for tuna, which is purse seining, and instead have stuck to pole and line fishing, which has employed hundreds of, I don't know if it's hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands more people than would be employed in the otherwise high-tech kind of purse seine industry. And it's something that we as business need to think about in terms of when is it actually a good idea to maybe not go with the highest tech. What kind of social impacts can we have if we choose some other options out there? And I think it speaks a little bit to Prof. King's talk this morning about inclusive capital, not just financial capital, and looking at that. So we then kind of looked at some of the kind of opportunities. We highlighted the fact that the markets have played a really important role at least in the fisheries sector. Over the last decade, they've really become an important driver of sustainability, and we've seen a lot of success there. The challenge is then including the small-scale sectors who often don't get included in those global markets, which are driven by kind of the developed world markets. And we have to figure out solutions for the small-scale fisher. And I think one of the big things that came up there was that business needs to be willing to share its resources with those other sectors, those smaller sectors who currently struggle to compete. We've seen business doing very well in terms of in South Africa, pre-competitive forums, working together to address some of the sustainability challenges. They need to try and find ways to pass it on to the small-scale sector. Then one of the sectors which wasn't really discussed and didn't seem to be present today is tourism. And tourism is highly dependent on healthy ecosystems, and it's really important that tourism starts to see its role in that bigger picture of maintaining healthy ecosystems and investing collaboratively in those healthy ecosystems. And then kind of a last point came up, and I'm glad to hear it came up in the consumption discussion as well, is around pollution, and increasingly the plastic pollution that we have in the ocean. It's this growing threat to both human health and marine ecosystems, and really that emphasis on companies looking at how they can reduce, reuse, redesign, and focus on the kind of circular economy. And that does not restrict you to the marine sector. It's all companies, because 80% of the pollution that's in the ocean was generated on land.
Perfect. You done? Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Some recurring themes from yesterday about small-scale access to markets, use of technology. I liked your point about don't necessarily go with the most advanced technology. That plays to some of the things we heard about yesterday about the risk of artificial intelligence. And maybe sometimes we need to keep the job still. And I like the link to tourism, which I'd never heard before. Did you know that tourism across the world generates 1 in every 10 jobs? Anyway, sorry. So Tony, SDG 15, and the clock is reset. Thank you.
If only we could reset the clock on life on land, SDG 15. It's pretty low down on the list. It's that fuzzy natural resource. It might appear in the environment element in your triple bottom line accounting. It appeals to the heart, but not really to the wallet. But then we thought, well, natural capital exceeds the capital wealth of the world, and we've got to look after it much better. We had an amazing panel of two very heavyweight NGOs, Morne Duplessis from WWF and Michael O'Brien Onyeki from Conservation International, and Dr. Kaba, the Deputy Minister in Ethiopia for Agriculture and Natural Resources. Challenge anyone else to tell me in the world, any country, that has joined up the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Natural Resources. That's progressive. We looked at challenges. Limited implementation capacity in natural resource management. Poor synergies between the sectors. In government cabinets, environment is pretty low down on the list. They make the tea. Little historic private sector interest in Africa. Now, as we've seen agricultural extension fade from public sector and being privatized, environmental extension is almost non-existent. So it's left to boutique projects, and we can't have that. Private sector's past involvement has been often around a competitive marketing advantage and not systemic change around the key issues. The opportunities, as we get better at looking at natural capital accounting, we can leverage that natural capital dividend much better. Natural capital is responsible for 30% of climate change mitigation, and yet it only gets 10% of finance. Big opportunity to level that. And if we understand the motivations of each other better, we'll be able to co-deliver. So then we framed our discussion around three key topics of partnerships, inclusivity, and interlinkages. On partnerships, everyone wants to lead, but nobody wants to be led. And so therefore, our appeal to everyone is to participate, to get involved in existing initiatives, and not to create a whole lot of new things. We need to match competencies because capacities are low. See more willingness from the private sector as awareness and education and opportunities arise. And we heard from Conservation International about their Center for Environment Business Leadership, and from WWF around partnering in the pre-competitive space. Inclusivity, the biggest missing element are youth. East Africa, 62% of the population are youth. These are the future stewards of that natural capital. They have aspirations, goals, and needs. And as they urbanize as well, that puts an additional dimension on it. Civil society, we heard Merv King this morning, civil society to private sector, they can be your conscience. They can help us make sure that we're not driving overconsumption and ask those very tough questions, but not in a controversial way, in a friendly way. In that rural-urban migration, when we considered that Africa will have 65% of the population living in cities by 2050, we need to think about the balance of that rural landscape, that life on land that is supporting us all. Now, there's this idea that subsistence agriculture is romantic. It's not. You're not a farmer, you're a professional weeder. But it's immoral that we have these subsistence farmers, and they're the stewards of much of our natural capital and our life on land, and we've got to engage them much more. But of the 120 million smallholder farmers in Africa and families, probably only half of them should be farmers. And what jobs do we have for them? What opportunities will there be? So we don't just need an African green revolution, we need an agricultural transformation, and we need a rural transformation to accompany that. Lastly, Malcolm, interlinkages. Oh, I'm just trying to use the time up here. Interlinkages.
You don't have to use your 5 minutes.
No, as such, many of the SDGs do link together, but there are other alternate framings, and that is the food, water, energy nexus. And we can't be boxed into thinking that these SDGs are silos. But when you look at the indicators indicate that they would be silos. And so we've got to have common indicators going across the SDGs, SDG 14 on life in the oceans, SDG 6 on water, SDG 2 on agriculture, SDG 13 on climate change. For private sector, they're interested in managing risks. And we see a much greater opportunity through those natural capital accounting type things of using that to manage risk, using that to identify these opportunities. And lastly, let's remember for every $1 of ODA, and we focused on ODA for natural capital management, for every $1 of ODA, there's $3 of remittances, $6 of FDI, $24 domestic private sector, and $35 of government expenditure. So private sector's got to be much better at linking with the government. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Perfectly on time. And a perfect segue, government needs linkage with the private sector. Eelco on SDG 16.
Thank you. We had perhaps a bit of a different approach, and basically the title of the session was How to Make It Happen. So to create peace, justice and strong institutions, we need to create an infrastructure to do so. That means we need to invest in people, organizations and technology to enable countries to achieve the SDGs. There are two issues to be solved first, before we can include all people in the system, which is quite important, of course. That is funding. How are states funded? Of course, by natural resources income, loans and tax. And secondly, the topic to solve is change management. So we started with the first. Countries are currently too dependent on income from natural resources. Global market fluctuations could have a very destabilizing effect on economies, as we have seen over the past couple of years. Loans are very expensive and make you dependent on the goodwill of donors and banks. So that leaves taxation. We think tax could be one of the drivers that is most easily to be upgraded in order to see for sustainable funding for the projects. A performant tax administration backing up a sustainable and fair infrastructure for tax is key. But since we lack qualified human resources and we do not have limited budgets, we must be smart and we must look at technology and cooperation with business and civil society to make it work. Cooperative compliance based on justified trust is the key. But then we come at the second point, change management. What means change in this respect? We must change our perspective and views and the way we work and used to work before. And that is always difficult because people are involved. Change management is the key for success for the sustainable funding of the SDGs. It is about creating a technology-based leverage model with business as administrations. If all stakeholders involved are serious about this, this is a field where we could make fast progress with quick results. And the most easy way to achieve change is showing success. So a piece of performance measurement built around an initiative like this would yield, that is at least what we thought, the best chance to get an independent, sustainable income flow to achieve the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, short and sharp. And I love that because you've never heard people talk about SDG 16 and how do governments finance it from their own pockets. And I think it's a really interesting perspective. And finally, Jenny, you do get your 5 minutes. Thank you, everybody else. Jenny, SDG 17.
Thank you. So SDG 17 is Partnerships for the Goals. And Malcolm set everybody the challenge yesterday to come back and do a feedback that included an example of a partnership that helped you to deliver the goals 1 to 16. So we took a slightly different approach. We thought we'd focus less on examples of partnerships and more on what we could learn from the partnerships in terms of how to establish them and how to make them work. So the partnerships is a means to an end. It's the way in which we're going to achieve the SDGs. And we had 5 very good examples of different partnerships, all grappling with the challenge of partnerships, but all achieving impact in their different ways. Interestingly, we didn't have any business speakers on the panel, but we did have some business corporate contribution from the audience. So the recurring themes in our discussion were the potential and the ability of, through partnership, to share knowledge, share expertise, and share resources. And this is one of the greatest potentials of partnership. Also, several of the partnerships represented were achieving scale through the partnership, and this was one of the best ways that they could reach big numbers and big impact. Several of the speakers spoke about the importance of aligning goals, and we've decided that win-win is not the term we should use anymore. It should be either we all win or we win, because the win-win suggests different types of winning. It's winning together. there's a huge emphasis on the importance of open and transparent communications in order to make partnerships work. And this necessity to understand what the mutual gain from the partnership could be. So that those are some very important principles. And also one of the initiatives in particular emphasized the need to understand the ecosystem. So map the existing initiatives and projects rather than duplicate, leverage on them. And in fact, the UNDP South-South collaboration is doing that. We recognized a problem with ownership and accountability in partnerships, and this kind of, once you've left the meeting, who's going to drive the partnership? We get very enthusiastic in meetings, but that continuity post-meeting isn't always there. And on the note of continuity, there is a real challenge in partnerships when some partnerships have a dominant leader, but then that leader either changes role or moves region or something. And how do you structure a partnership so that it's resilient through that change in leadership? We talked about different structures, and I personally was very critical of partnerships which are transactional, which is quite simply something like a corporate paying an NGO something, and in return they get to use the logo on a product or a website. So rather than having transactional partnerships, we were really looking at the constraint-free, creative types of partnerships which are transformational. And then we concluded the discussion around what are the skills and the education needs for partnerships. Because we talk about this all the time, but I don't think we really think about what we need to do differently and better. So the skills included honesty, competence, openness, trust, know the ecosystems, shared values, a multidisciplinary approach, an entrepreneurial focus, and that the absolute winning phrase of the whole discussion was that partnerships is not a skill, it's a mindset. And we thought that really summed it up well. So I think with less than, or I've got a minute left on the clock, that's all from me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So to end, not a skill, a mindset. I'm writing that down. Thank you. So thank you very much indeed, panelists. On time, perfect job. Thank you.